Whoops, not that one. Darn it. Eli, what are you doing? What are you doing, Eli? There we go. So as you guys know, I am Eli, the computer guy, and today we are taping out of Spiceworks headquarters here in Austin, Texas. So I was invited down. As you guys know, Spiceworks has been a sponsor of mine for about a year now. I've been very happy with that because they have some really, really good, honest to golly products. And again, as I keep telling you, they're 100% free. So even if you don't like them, there's, you should use them. They have free mobile device management software, free network management software, free community, all kinds of great stuff for you. So they've been a sponsor of mine for about a year, and so they invited me down to Austin, Texas to take a look at what they're doing. So through this week, I'm able to interview all of the prominent people in their organization and also see how their organization operates. So this morning I was running around their server room and I got to see all of their massive racks of servers and ask them why they use this and that and the other thing. So yesterday was really good. I don't know if you've seen it yet. I haven't really been able to advertise it much yet, but I did an interview with Scott Abel. So he is one of the co-founders and the CEOs of Spiceworks. And so we sat here and I interviewed him for 2 hours and 4 minutes, and it was all very, very, very good stuff. And again, it's very good information because this is a person who has built up a startup company from nothing to they have 250 employees now. They're probably going to gain 100 employees over the next year. They just closed $57 million in funding, and he sat here and we talked for 2 hours, and he told me all of his thoughts. So that was a good thing. So today we did an interview a little bit earlier. That's what I'm going to show you now with Greg Kattawar. He is one of the co-founders too, and he is the vice president of vice president of development. He's a vice president of development. So in the interview, we're talking about things like why they decided to use Ruby on Rails, whether or not they've thought about doing a complete rewrite of all of their code, all of this kind of stuff. Why they use the infrastructure that they do. Do they use cloud? Do they use hardware? What they use. So that's basically what is going on. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you this interview. So the interview with Greg lasted about an hour, and then again, as you guys know, the big part of this show is, of course, the question and answer section. That's really why you're here, right? I mean, really, interviews are nice. Yay, we get to talk to really important people that actually give us useful amounts of information. But really, I know you guys really want to do the questions. So if you have a question, all you have to do, I am taking questions today, all you have to do is write question in all uppercase letters, colon, and then whatever your question is. Should I get my CCNA? Stuff like that, and I will get to it on a first come, first served basis. It is really cool. I'm going to have Chris as the co-host for the show once the interview is over, and he is the director of IT here. So he is the most important person, at least within the IT world here. And so when you guys ask the questions, he will jump in and say what his answers are. Again, I know a lot of people out there that view these videos. They think, well, Eli is arrogant. Eli is egotistical. Eli just thinks he knows everything. And as I keep telling you guys, no, I know I don't. I've been in this field way too long to think I know everything. So that's why I bring in these interviewees and these co-hosts so you can hear what they have to say. If you don't like my opinion, you can listen to their opinion. But what you're going to find out that's kind of sad, my opinion matches a lot of these people's opinions. So there you go. But with that, let's transfer over. Like I say, we're gonna watch this interview. Again, this is really good. This is the vice president of development for a real honest to golly company. So if you skip this, I would argue you're being kind of foolish, but that's just my opinion. So let's go over here and take a look at the interview. I truly do. I think you guys will enjoy this thing. So I'm here with Greg Kattawar, co-founder of Spiceworks and VP of Development. So we're going to be talking about his role here in Spiceworks. Because again, we talked with Scott Abel yesterday. One of the interesting things with Spiceworks is that there's actually 4 co-founders. So all the co-founders have different roles and responsibilities with Spiceworks. So we're going to be talking with Greg to kind of get an idea of how he sees Spiceworks, how he sees what he does with the company, and how things are going to be going forward. So, I mean, the first question, I talked about this with Scott Abel yesterday, is, whenever anybody looks at a business, it's much like a piece of art. Every single individual who looks at it has a different view on what it actually is. And one of the issues that you can run into is that different people see the business different ways. So when you look at like Spiceworks, because you've got network management software, mobile device management software, you got the community, you got the profiles, you got a few other things going on. What do you see Spiceworks as?
Well, Eli, there's kind of two views I have it. One as a product person, I feel like I'm a product guy, and the other is kind of from the user's perspective. And I'll start with the users first because that's generally how we approach things here. I think from the user perspective, at least in my view, Spiceworks should be around to help them do their job, their day job, in networking, systems management, all those types of things, day-to-day work. We want to add value to that, make it a little easier, do things for them. It shouldn't be where we make their job harder. It's that statements around how hard things are to configure and set up. We try to make that as easy as possible and do as much for them as we can. And we try to do that in all aspects of the day, whether they're researching products on the internet or trying to solve some networking problem, and do that for free. The key thing is doing it for free. And the part that I like the most, and I will get to the inside piece that I look at from as a product person. The fact that we only really can make money as a business through usage. And usage implies people get value from what they're using, otherwise they won't use it. And what it really does is it forces, I'll speak in terms that I deal with, the development folks really have to focus on what are people going to use. Otherwise there's no point in building it. And the tough part is we have so many users, they all want something slightly different. And you can't build everything. It's figuring out what are the key things you're going to build to add the most value. And so, the big thing to me is building the right things to add the most value to the workday.
So then, so you're co-founder and you're VP of development. What in fact does that mean? Like, what is your job?
I do a little bit of everything. At least that's what it feels like. I'd say I spend a fair amount of time working with the various product teams. And what we try to do at Spiceworks is keep the development teams pretty small. Okay. I'd say in general six or less is kind of a good operating size for us. And I work with the teams, helping them make decisions about what to build, when to build it, where to draw the line. And I think where to draw the line is a big deal because we have a lot of really sharp guys, and you give them a problem, they'll come up with a pretty elaborate solution. Yeah. And it might take them 8 months to do that. And then we might say, all right, what can you do in 3 months? Yeah. And so we got to whittle it down. And what it does is it forces you to really focus on what adds the most value with the least amount of effort. Okay. And by effort, I'm talking about on the user side. Because generally speaking, the more functionality you add, the more complexity you add, it makes it a little tougher on the user. And before you know it, things get really hard for the users to deal with. And we really try to avoid that.
So you try. So how do you balance that, the user interface or the usability versus the actual?
It's tough. If you ask me like what's the toughest thing we fight, this is probably it. We're constantly trying to add new things, and in general, the more things you add, the more complex it's going to get. That's just a general statement. That's probably true. And so, what we do is we constantly look at metrics, usage metrics across everything in our app. So we collect stats, on what people click on, and when we see things go down, we try to figure out why it might be going down, or is something not visible that needs to be visible, or is something hidden that needs to be up at the top level maybe. Yeah. And it's this constant kind of funnel because people are coming in looking for X, and you want them to find X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And to the extent you can get them to find Y and Z quick, that's good for us because it means they're going to use more. And it's a constant struggle. There's no right answer. I don't think you're ever done doing it. You just keep chipping away at the problem. And it's something literally every team in our development staff has to deal with.
So you're a co-founder. So you got 4 co-founders. So normally, like when I talk with startup companies, it's like you've got the business co-founder, and you've got the technical co-founder. And so it's pretty easy to understand how everything gets divvied up. Right. Once you start talking about getting 4 co-founders, like with Scott, like how does he become the CEO and you become the VP of development?
So actually, I think he's the only one that wanted to do the job. None of us, I think, really wanted it. He's probably the most qualified. I mean, Scott has a little bit of all aspects of the job that he's good at.
Yeah.
Most of us we try to score really high in certain areas, the ones we like, and it was a pretty easy conversation to have. I mean, we all kind of knew what each other were good at because we'd worked with each other before we started Spiceworks, and so the roles were pretty laid out already. It was actually kind of easy. Yeah.
So, I mean, for you, or advice for other people, I mean, did you codify any of this? Would you recommend? Because a lot of times they talk about, even if you don't need a contract, you should write a contract just so you have a contract. Like, do you think that's a good idea with roles?
I kind of got two things that I would advise people on. One is if you're going to start a company, do it with people you trust. Or you probably already know at some level, so you don't get into this contract stuff because that won't ever be pretty. And the second thing is really be self-aware of what you're good at and what you're not so good at, and make sure you have all the bases covered. If it takes other people, get other people. And you got to be self-aware of what you're really good at and what you're not so good at, and get someone to fill that void. And the thing that I think we did a pretty good job of was, between the four of us, we've got all the bases fully covered. We could all do pieces of the other person's job, but not as well. And so I think with four of us, we've got the bases covered real well.
So if something happened to one of you guys, just you're older, heart attack or something.
Yeah.
Like, if you had to get replaced, or somebody would get replaced, would you replace them with an employee, or would you try to find another founder for that position?
It depends who it was. It depends who it was. We've got I'd say on the technical side, there could be one or two people that could step into my position, or maybe Francis's position, our CTO. On the marketing side, we've got Sanjay could maybe step into Jay's role potentially. I could see that. So we've got one or two people that could step up to the next level if the need arose. If Scott kicked off, I think he's the oldest of the group, so he's most likely to kick off. That'd be tough. Jay would probably be the most logical choice for that, because he's got the business and the sales side covered well, and he works real well with Francis and I, so we could probably get by. It'd be a little unpleasant, but we'd get by.
Okay. So when you have four people, how do you resolve disputes? Because I can't imagine, even if you guys are best buds, I can't imagine you all agree on everything.
Oh no. We have plenty of arguments, that's for sure.
So how do you resolve, especially when, like I say, in business, a lot of times you have two right answers. Frankly, you have right answers.
Yep.
So how do you resolve that?
I think the first thing is, we all know each other really well, and so nothing gets held back. So when we have arguments, it's full tilt, everything gets thrown out on the table, and there's nothing hidden. So you get all 10 aspects of the conversation get out on the table. I think on technical matters, Francis and I, the CTO, and I have worked together for over 20 years. So we generally get agreement real fast, just because I think we blink at each other and we know what we're saying. So that one's really easy. I think where it gets a little more contentious is when some aspects of the business or sales impact the product. That's where Francis and I will kind of collide with Scott and Jay, which is kind of naturally what you'd expect. Usually logic wins out. I think at some level, all four of us do a good job of articulating arguments in a logical manner. So emotion doesn't get in it. Opinion usually doesn't get in it, because those things, there's hard to clear those up. And usually logic wins the day. And I hate to say it, it's kind of a cop-out, but I feel like usually when we get in arguments, someone wins the argument. Like, there's a winner, and we go with the winner. And that's probably the way it ought to be. And I think if you make the best argument, you'll probably win. And I think the important thing is, at least with founders, being able to have a full-blown argument without holding anything back and not feeling like someone has some hidden agenda. And that's why I say you really have to trust each other implicitly. So
we've got the company, we've got the founder. So what what makes you qualified to do what you do? So you're the VP of development. That's a very big name there.
I don't know. It's something. It's something.
So what? So how do you get to your position, or how do you get to the point where you feel comfortable doing that?
Yeah, I feel like in order to manage things at any level, you have to become an expert at it, so you understand it fully.
Yeah.
And I've done IT stuff when I was in college. Obviously, I wrote a lot of code.
Yeah.
Was a developer for a long time. Tested stuff as well. So I've obviously spent a lot of time getting my hands dirty.
Yeah.
And worked on small projects, large projects, open source projects, you name it.
Yeah.
And I think you have to understand it completely from soup to nuts. And then there's an element of what do you really want to do in life? Not everybody is cut out to do this job. And to be honest, there's aspects of it I don't like. I prefer to just work on product stuff all the time because that's what I really enjoy.
Yeah.
And when you kind of move up the food chain, you start dealing with more people problems. And as companies get bigger, there's just more people, and guess what? There's more people problems. And I didn't go to school for that.
Yeah.
And so the part I enjoy the most is when it's really small and it's everybody's focused to me on the product. So the best time for a startup for me is the early stage stuff, the first couple of years when literally 100% of the focus of the company is on the product. Because there's not many users, there's no sales, none of that other stuff even exists yet.
Yeah.
And it's really fun for development folks because there's just everything's on the product. And then as you get bigger and you succeed, the other things come into play, sales and marketing and all that type of stuff comes into play. And then eventually it evolves into that's a bigger focus.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the challenges we have, and I think as a leader, it's to keep focus on things even though, for the development staff, even though maybe at the company level, there's more focus on making a sales number or some marketing campaign or driving the business forward, which is always the case. And it's just, what do you talk about? What do you make people think is important to them? And you want everyone to feel like what they're working on is important because guess what? It is.
Yeah.
And I think as a leader, you've got to kind of look at everybody. What does everybody care about? Make them all feel important. And it's not. It's one of the things that takes time. It's not just do you understand everything. A lot of it is experience, and you've been through things before, and you've seen how things play out with small groups and larger groups. And I kind of worked my way from teams of 3 and 8 to 12 to 24 to 60 something to 100 and something. And I got to admit the smaller ones I prefer more just because it's more product and less people. And but when you're successful, you get more people, and it's just a different kind of problem to deal with. And I think for development folks that want to move down the kind of management path a little bit, I think it's important to stay technically focused on things so you understand them real well. Stay close to the product. I always try to put the product first. I think if you generally always do that, good things happen. Okay. And then if you've got a bit of a leadership gene in you, that obviously helps a lot. And I think being honest and have a high degree of integrity always is a good thing.
So when we start looking at Spiceworks, so since you do the development, and we got the mobile device stuff, the network management, and the community, so what technologies do you use here for Spiceworks? What is this stuff built on?
We've got Ruby on Rails is kind of our core platform. The way there's kind of 2 big buckets. I'll break it up into 2 buckets.
Yeah.
One bucket, I'll just say is the community. And it runs on an Apache server, Postgres database, all hosted up in the sky. I don't know how many servers we got now. It's probably a couple dozen, I'm sure. And then the other bucket I'd say is the app, the thing people download and install. Yeah. And that's a totally separate thing. And it's mainly a Ruby on Rails app. We have a lot of JavaScript. It's your basic web app. It installs a little web server locally, a little database locally, and you can hit it from any browser in your network, and it just hits your own little web server. So you kind of have your own little mini web server running a Ruby on Rails app. And Ruby on Rails it speeds up a lot of things because we can you can get a lot of code up and running pretty fast. The place where Ruby on Rails kind of doesn't help so much is on the high end. Scalability wise, it can become a problem unless you have a lot of hardware to back it up. And some of our larger customers run into performance problems because it's not all pure Ruby on Rails, but that's a piece of it. And it's something that we kind of deal with constantly. Working on performance. It's JRuby is one of the things we're going to be moving forward to kind of get a big speed up across the app, but which we've already done on the server side up in the sky, but we're going to do that in the app as well.
So why? So you're 8 years old. So 8 years ago. So why did you guys decide Ruby on Rails?
So it's funny. That's a good one. We were looking at. I think back then we had Francis, myself, and Tabrez were the three technical people. And Tabrez back then was a developer. He was like our first dev guy, and we just had him off looking at languages to use. Yeah. We said, well, Tabrez, let's look at something and see what you like. And you want people to believe in what they use. You don't want to force some pill down their throat they don't like. And he was looking at Python and Ruby on Rails, and back then, and they're pretty similar. There's not that big of a difference. But back then, if you just looked at how active the communities were, we felt like the Ruby on Rails community was a little more active, and it looked like there was going to be a little more innovation going on there, even though Python was more established. Yeah. And so we went with the one that was a little more active, and Tabrez believed in it and wanted to do it. So we kind of went down the path, and it's got us this far.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying JRuby, like, how much effort does that take? I actually don't know about JRuby.
Yeah, it's a lot. So we've had a few people working on it for I think north of 6 months already, and it's kind of you got to gut the whole thing underneath. Yeah. And really the benefits are around multi-users. So it'll let us utilize multiple cores, so we don't have one thread coming through. And so for installations that have 2, 3, 4, 5, or north of 5 users all hitting the app at the same time, the JRuby stuff will let it parallelize out, and there should be a significant speed improvement for those folks. Whereas right now, they're all fighting for the same access, so it gets kind of tough.
So is this a complete rewrite, or is it just
No, it's just rewriting a lot of the underneath stuff. A lot of the stuff on top will stay the same. I mean, we work on that too, but that's a separate effort.
So with a company like that, I mean, like, would you ever think of a complete rewrite, or?
I think because I think a fair question to ask is if you started the company today, would you do things different? The answer is heck yeah, we would. We know a lot more. Yeah. And so I think it's a bit of the innovator's dilemma, where you want to move things forward and not alienate your user base. But you want to innovate. I mean, everyone likes innovating stuff. And so, I think one of the challenges is finding ways to innovate in pieces. So the approach we're taking now is, and even on some of the network monitoring stuff we're working on, rewriting, wholesale chunks of it from scratch, maybe in a whole new technology. We're looking at some of the Go stuff from Google, and rewriting whole pieces, but having ways to plug it in so it doesn't look like the whole thing got scrapped. Okay. Not to mention to rewrite the whole thing would take quite a while. Users don't. I don't know if our users would even like us spending. I'm going to make this up. If it took us a full year to rewrite the whole thing, and all you got was new technologies underneath and nothing new, that doesn't sound so hot. No. What sounds better to me is this piece got rewritten. Maybe it's faster, newer stuff, and you got a bunch of new functionality out of it. Yeah. And then it plugged into the other stuff, and then over time we kind of plug in other pieces.
With that, like when we're talking about the development cycle, one of the issues, it's supposed to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. From the company standpoint, as a user, I absolutely hate it. This whole idea of some of these companies, like Twitter talks about it, where they will deploy updates like 5 times in a single day.
Yeah.
Do you do that kind of thing? Like, what is your update cycle for something like this?
So I'll break it up into two buckets. On the server side, our servers up in the sky, we may deploy new software up there every week or two. Okay. A lot of it's subtle stuff that you might not even notice, and it's not like the users do anything. Usually it's fixing things, to be honest. Yeah. But new functionality can show up that way as well. The bigger thing's the app. So when they install the app, you've got bits installed locally, and when we update them, you got to update them. And we've got a somewhat passive, I kind of like a lazy passive update procedure where we'll send out emails and tell people, hey, there's a new version available that usually has a lot of bug fixes and a bunch of good stuff in it. And some people will adopt it right then. Like they'll just go download it, install it, and they're up and running. Yeah. Over time, and it's usually in units of weeks, we'll have more bug fixes and hot fixes because it's fair to say we can't test every IT environment in the world. That's like impossible. Yeah. So when we roll stuff out, people will get in an environment that we hadn't seen and we didn't test it, and they found something we couldn't find, and we do our best to fix those things. We'll build up a bunch of hot fixes and put a patch out, and then update that version again. That's all voluntary. At some point when the hot fixing kind of stops and we don't really get much more of it, we'll roll out another version, and then we do this thing we call rollout tokens, and we turn on these tokens, and the tokens will, each app will contact the server, and the server will say, hey, there's this new version out. And once you get a token, it starts a clock, and the clock, I believe, it's set at 60 days. So once your token's set, you got 60 days to update to that version.
Oh, okay.
And so we try to get all the hot fixing stuff kind of done voluntarily, where people are doing it on their own. Yeah. And once we feel like it's kind of come to an end and there's not much left, or it's dwindled down, we roll out the tokens, and then everyone's app gets a token, and then the clock starts, and so then you still got 60 days. Okay. And then after 60 days, if you haven't updated, it'll just pull down the version and update itself. So it's a bit of a compromise, a little bit of both. And when we started the company, we just had immediate updates. Yeah. Like, we put it up there and you just got it. And that people didn't like that so much. Yeah, no. That was too fast. Then I think we went to 90, and that was a little too long. Yeah. Because then what happens is you might release another version in between the time the tokens got released. Okay, yeah. And then you got two large groups of users on different versions of the software, which isn't great for support. Yeah. So then we kind of pulled back to 60 days, and that seems to be a pretty good middle ground.
Okay. So when you're dealing with your employees, especially with programmers, because it's like, if you have auto mechanics or if you have people that are more physical, it's kind of easy to track and measure what they're doing. A brick wall was built. They're supposed to build a brick wall in a day. Yep, we got a brick wall. When you're doing coding, how do you track and actually make sure all your people are doing whatever they're supposed to be doing?
Well, I'd say trust is probably at the top of the list. Okay. So we generally try to hire people that we trust and respect and believe left on their own, they'll do the right thing. Now, there's degrees of that. So, someone right out of college generally won't do the right thing right out of the chute. As they get more experience, they will. What we generally try to do is, I'd say something that's different about development at Spiceworks is we really put a lot of ownership on the individual. Okay. And what that means is you may be given 2 or 3 kind of big problems to work on. Yeah. And there's 100 ways you could solve them. Some could take a month, some could take a year. Okay. You may only have 2 or 3 months, and the hard part of the problem is figuring out what are you going to try to do in those 2 or 3 months. Yeah. And they kind of come up with the solution they want to, utilize and implement that. And, we hold them to dates. We have dates, internal dates, milestones, all that good stuff. Test people are involved to test things along the way. Not everybody's perfect. They try. They try. They usually bite off more than they can chew. I bet that's a general statement that's true. And we try to keep the dates close. I wouldn't say we're religious about hitting the exact date. Yeah. We push really hard to make dates because what it does is it forces people to make decisions. And it may mean you cut something out that you wanted to get done. And to me, that's what has to happen. And what happens if you don't do that is across, say, 50 people, all trying to get a little extra stuff in, the release just moved out 3 months. Okay, and then our users don't like that. They want the thing to come out when you said. Yeah. And so dates generally are around forcing decisions to get made. And then once the software goes out, the way you measure it is usage. I just go back to usage. Yeah. Hopefully everything we build, maybe not literally everything, but most things we build there's some usage aspect to it. Like we're trying to get more of this or more of that or more people going this way through the app. Yeah. And it's usually measurable. I mean, most of the time. And it's, it's a chart and you hope it goes up and to the right.
So one thing I've noticed here, and I may have missed it because they've got a surprisingly big building here. There's no ping pong tables, foosball tables, arcade games. At least I've seen. Maybe you have them in a corner.
Yeah.
Almost every startup I've been to, I don't know what the hell it is. I'm like tripping over ping pong balls.
Yeah.
Like I guess one, why do you think they have them, and two, why don't you? Because you're like I say, it's just.
Well, we've had them at other companies I've been at, and okay. I don't know if it worked out so well. So there may be just some of baggage we're carrying with us on at least ping pong. Yeah. Now, as far as having fun goes, which is I think the spirit of it, we've got video. They've got PS2s and different video games they have off over there, and I think they play dominoes and cards, and there's poker and stuff like that. I think a lot of folks here work out a lot. Okay. If you talk about stress relief a little bit, which is maybe a little bit about what ping pong's about. Yeah. A lot of people work out. There's martial arts. There's yoga. Yeah. There's a big yoga group. People ride bikes. I think there's probably a little more active slant on stress relief here than maybe at most companies. Yeah. There's no special reason we don't have ping pong other than we just didn't pick it. I'm not necessarily against it. We urge people to manage their own time, and they come in when they want, they leave when they want. If they want to go play their video game, they go play the video games. If they want to go run 7 miles in the heat, knock yourself out. I think it's about managing your time and doing stuff that keeps you happy. And, I think one of the other things we've learned, at least a couple of us the hard way, we've worked at startups where you put in 80 to 110 hours a week, and you can only keep that up so long, and it just, it'll wear you down. Yeah. And we try to keep people working at a pace that they can sustain over the long haul and be happy doing it. One of the things I'm most proud of here is the fact that people enjoy working here. Yeah. And we like to keep that going.
So it's not, because that's one of the arguments with the old economy versus the new economy. So if you look at it, like whether it's PlayStation 2s or ping pongs or running, is this, because most, if you're a bricklayer, you think it's just the lazy programmers. Isn't that a nice perk? So is it a perk or actually more of a requirement that people just don't realize?
I think it's tough for people to just sit in front of a computer, and I'm speaking mainly from development. Yeah. I can't speak for marketing per se, but just sitting in front of a computer and writing code all day, every day, and at night, it's hard to sustain that. It is rough. Some people can, but most can't. Yeah. And I think giving people some freedom to do some things that they want to do keeps them happier. Yeah. I think it makes for a happier employee, and they can sustain things longer. And then when you do need them to really push hard, it's not such a big deal to folks. They can do it.
And then one of the questions I had here, because I've noticed, again, with all the startup companies, and you guys have it, is everybody has the fully stocked beer refrigerator.
Fridge, yeah.
And one of the things I was saying is, paying attention to business is, as liability concerns are becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger thing. Most companies have gotten rid of alcohol. Like even when they have happy hours, it's Coca-Cola happy hours.
Yeah, that's no fun.
But it's safe.
Yes.
And so that's one of the interesting, especially when you have so many young people. I think 50% of your employees are under 28. Is what Scott said. Yeah, probably. So do you guys see that as a liability? And it's kind of like with ping pong, it's just like a curious thing, that alcohol is so prevalent.
I don't think we thought about it a whole lot, to be honest. I think it kind of goes back to the trust thing. We generally trust people not to drink too much. Yeah. You got to stay professional. You're still in a work environment here. We do it at the end of the day, so it's not like most people don't go back to work afterwards. And generally speaking, if people have 1 or 2 beers, it's not no one's going to get sloshed on that. Yeah. But as we get bigger, there's a chance something may come up where we have to do something a little more formal. I'd like to use the word formal rather than cut it out. But I'd like to keep it because it was one of the things we did when we started the company. It's worked real well for us so far. We've had no issues with it to date, so we've made it 8 years. Keep our fingers crossed. And It's the one time where everybody in the company gets together. We get to present things from each department, so the other departments get to see what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's in a really informal atmosphere where people have a beer and some chips or popcorn or whatever they got.
Yeah.
And it keeps it kind of informal and loose and a little bit funny, so there's a lot of humor in there.
Yeah.
A lot of people jabbing each other, which I think is great.
Yeah. Okay. So going back to like your infrastructure and all that, so one of the big dynamics now is this whole local versus cloud. So how are you guys dealing with that? Because you said you have cloud and you have local.
Yeah.
Do you have a data center here? Do you do co-location? Like how does that look, and what was the decision process there?
When we started out, everything was when you installed the app, everything was local. Like the whole thing was self-contained locally. The only thing that came from the sky were ads, because we had an ad server up in the sky. Over time, what's happened is the internet's gotten faster and more people have it, and it's more reliable. Because remember, 8 years ago, it wasn't quite like it is now. It's different now. We've got models where, if you're looking on any given page, 2/3 of the page may be fed locally, and 1/3 may be fed from a server in the sky, which is effectively a cloud, like a cloud app.
Yeah.
And so what I like to say is we have a hybrid model.
Okay.
So in the app, there are pages that are all local. There's some pages that come almost all from the cloud, and some have a little of both.
Yeah.
And I think the benefits of having the stuff up in the cloud are so we can update it easier.
Yeah.
That's the main thing.
Yeah.
Rolling out software to 1 million plus users is it takes a long time, and it's error prone. It's tough, and being able to update our servers, fixing bugs is easier. Rolling out patches, it's just everything's easier if it's up in the cloud for us.
Yeah.
And users just get the benefits right out of the chute. They don't have to update anything. So I think in general we're trying to put more stuff up in the cloud where it makes sense. So the line, at least to us, has been, when you scan network data that's internal to a network, which may have sensitive information in it. There's questions about sending that up to the cloud. That's a legit concern. And to date, and I don't see us change that anytime soon. To date, we leave all that stuff local. So the IT guy that's worried about all of his data getting shipped up to the sky, that's we've tried to stay away from that. I could see us with a model moving forward where more of the UI things that you see may get fed from the sky, but a lot of the data that it's using is local. So it still may be a hybrid model, but it gives us a little bit of benefits of both sides, where the local stuff's local and we can update things kind of as we need to up in the sky, so things are faster.
So we got the local, and so for the local user, it's a hybrid. So they're going up to the cloud. But then what does the cloud then actually mean? Is that pinging? Is that AWS servers, or is that, like I say, do you have 24 physical servers in a co-location facility?
We co-locate. Yeah, our servers are co-located. We've got them in a couple different places. OnRamp is one of the ones that we've got where we have a lot of our servers. We're moving to a couple different places to scale worldwide that have remote data centers around the world for speed. It's just for speed. When we started, I think we had 2 servers. Now we got a lot. But in general, we co-locate things. That way we can add functionality when we need to, add servers when we need to. And then we have sites, I don't know where they all are now, they're around the world, so that if you're overseas, you're hitting a data center that's closer, you don't have to come across the ocean. And moving forward, we'll probably keep that model. I think doing stuff in the sky is definitely kind of the way to go now. We just have to be sensitive about where data needs to live locally and where it needs to live up in the sky.
So what was there a decision there? Because the question is, because again, whenever anybody thinks cloud, a lot of times I think AWS or Amazon Web. So was there a decision? Have you thought about using AWS?
Oh yeah, we do use AWS for some things.
For something.
We haven't moved our servers that host the app functionality to AWS yet.
Okay.
I think the decision-making process is around, do you really need, to me, a lot of the AWS benefits are around whether you have big spikes.
Okay.
And if you have a lot of spikes, it's really useful because you pay for it when you need it and you don't when you don't need it. Our usage pattern is a lot more steady.
Okay.
So any big hosting facility, Rackspace, they do that. That's like table stakes to them.
Yeah.
And we pay a lot of money a month and have a lot of servers and add them all the time and upgrade them all the time.
Yeah.
And we're constantly upgrading the network around our servers. And it's one of the things that it's not like a core business thing for us to have networking guys in our building that are big data center guys. We have a couple that are really good at it, but that's not like having a team of 20 that are dealing with all your servers all day. So it makes a lot of sense for us to have our servers hosted elsewhere. And I'm just amazed at how much it's grown. I remember we had 2, now we go through 2 in like an hour.
Wow. So I guess that's one of the questions for the fan base out there. It's all, what do you actually use for your servers? So what OS, or do you use multiple? Like what's your favorite distro?
Oh gosh. I think on the server side, Unix wins the day.
Unix,
in general, it's more of a Unix. It's a Unix platform. A lot of our IT guys are Unix jockeys.
Okay, yeah.
On the app, Windows is still kind of, like it or not, Windows is still king. They've got 90-some-odd% of the market. So, I think on the desktops and whatnot, Windows still wins the day. We continually get asked to get our app running on Unix or Mac OS.
Yeah.
And I could see that happening. We've got some skunk projects that are real close to having that working.
Okay.
There's only 1 or 2 things that don't work quite right, but it's close. So I could see us getting there.
Yeah.
Because the Macs they're growing a lot. So I could see us the app working on a Mac sometime in the near future here.
So with all your developers and all that, again, one of the other questions is what do you use? So obviously, I am now apparently a Mac fan.
You are completely a Mac guy. Yes.
So what do the real in a big company? What do the real developers use?
I think I haven't counted, but I would guess it's 80% use Macs.
80% use Macs.
And when I say Mac, I literally mean they're getting the Unix stuff.
Yeah.
There's some tools on the Mac that are great for Ruby on Rails. There's a lot, you can get to all the Unix tools, which they all like. And you can't argue with a lot of that stuff. It's been around a long time. It works real well. And I'd say about 20 use Windows.
Okay.
And I think where it gets tough is when you're on a Mac and the software you're writing is supposed to run on Windows, and so they have VMs and all that stuff, but it's just, it starts slowing down and it gets a little complicated. And there's trade-offs both ways. I don't know if there's a definitive winner, but just numbers-wise, I know Macs went out here, it's probably 80-20, I suspect. So yeah, it's good. And the Macs are nice, they're nice machines.
So when you're doing all the coding and all that, so open source is the big thing now. So do you guys integrate open source into any of your stuff?
Yeah, we have a lot of, I don't know the names off the top of my head, but it's I don't know if it's in the hundreds, but it's definitely in the tens of open source software that we use inside our product, because it's free.
Yeah.
And we contribute to open source projects as well, mainly on the Ruby on Rails side, obviously. And it helps us a ton. I mean, it was one of the reasons, when you asked the question earlier about the technology we picked, one of the reasons we picked Ruby on Rails is because the community was more active, and active generally means more projects getting built that do things.
Okay.
And so we leverage as much of that stuff as we can. The one thing it's just sad, I don't know if disappointed is the right word, it's just how long it takes for us to update to the latest versions of all the core technologies, because when they change Ruby or Rails, to us it's a big effort to fix everything. And it takes months just to fix it once we decide to make the change. And the users don't get a lot of extra function out of it. It's just on the newer stuff. And so those things are always kind of painful to go through. So being part of an active community means that's always happening under your feet, and you got to try to stay up close to the head of the tree. So it's a constant, kind of battle or race.
So we're going to talk about it in a minute with patents, but then so you're bringing in this open source software to a pretty successful company. Okay. How do you vet that? Because if you're talking about even tens, how do you vet that to make sure you're not bringing in some massive legal liability?
Yeah, we usually try to get things that have been used elsewhere before. So we try not to be the first ones using some new thing. So
Okay.
first we try to get something after it's been out a while and been used and it's been flushed out.
Yeah.
You can go read about what people have to say about it. That's usually a smart thing to do first.
Yeah.
And then when we bring stuff in, our developers will look at it. They'll kind of inspect it and see if there's any holes in it or security things that we need to worry about. We might change some things and submit it back to get at it. And then when we integrate things in, we make sure we, test them thoroughly. I think testing's a big deal. People like to overlook that stuff, but it's what catches things. I mean, no one person knows everything and can catch everything. So it's kind of I don't want to say a team thing, but it's kind of a team thing.
Yeah.
And the more people you have running things through its paces and checking for different things, the better chance you have of catching any of these kind of weird things that pop up.
So when you guys are doing the development, like looking for open source and all that, I know there's GitHub, there's like Stack Overflow. Like what are your guys' go-to?
GitHub. I think GitHub's the winner. Well, they use both of those.
Yeah.
I think, they got stats on it, but I think GitHub's the one I hear everybody talk about the most. So I suspect GitHub's is the one that we use the most.
Is there anything else that people might like some random hey, check that out? I don't know. Like some
There
random.
probably is. I just don't get to see it all. I wish I did. I just don't get to see all that stuff. GitHub's the one I definitely hear the most.
Okay. So then, kind of like with that idea of like, where do you go to for things? Communities and all the tech communities are this big idea. So when you're young, or even for somebody like me, there's a zillion things you can go to and try to find advice. When you get to your position, because obviously you don't know everything. So like
I like to think I do, but I know I don't.
You know. So like, where do you go? Like when you're stumped, or when you know that there's probably a better way to do something. Mm-hmm. Who do you go to for advice?
This is a little cliche,
Yeah.
but I know a lot of people that have similar responsibilities that I have,
Okay.
and I like to leverage people I know and I trust.
Yeah.
And I've known them for years, and if I run into something really tough that I don't feel like I can get myself out of on my own, I'll get advice from people I know usually.
Yeah.
I'm a little on the older side, and so trusting someone is higher on my list than getting advice from people that I don't know real well. I've just seen it not turn out well for other folks, so I try to stay away from that stuff and not make the same mistake.
So, I mean, obviously you're older, but I mean, can you give advice for how to?
Obviously.
But like, can you give advice for building that network? Because like Scott was saying yesterday, he thinks people are over networking, and so there's a weird line where
Yep.
you in fact need to meet people, but
Yep.
you also don't need to be at meetups every night. So.
Yeah, Scott was probably getting at meeting the right people. Is probably what he meant to say.
Yeah.
I think it when you work with folks and you start a company, I think it's important to kind of identify one question you can ask yourself is, out of this company has probably 250 or so people.
Yeah.
And if you were going to start a company with 10,
Yeah.
okay, who do you pick? Who are the 10 people you pick?
Yeah.
And those are the people you probably want to stay close to and know, right?
Yeah.
And you do that through a few startups,
Yeah.
and now you've got a network of 30 to 50 people, and that have gone through it. The trick is to know people that have gone through it, because they may have gone through what you're battling,
Yeah.
and they know that if you pick this is going to happen. If you pick this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think getting to know people that have done successful startups is a big deal. And when I tell folks when they interview here, all startups are not equal. Some of them are pretty bad, and you're not going to learn anything good. You're not going to meet anybody you want to remember.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a pleasant experience. And the trick is to know how to pick them. And so, for younger folks that haven't been around much, it's tough. It's how do you, they're interviewing you, and I say, well, you need to be interviewing them as well, and figure out, do you trust them? If you were going to start a company, would you start it with that person or not?
Yeah.
And be thinking that during the interview process. And if you're unsure, that's usually a sign no. unless it's a definite yes, to me that turns into a no pretty quick.
Okay.
And it takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. It takes years to build that network of people up. And I feel real fortunate that I got into the startup industry, way back in the early 90s. And it's played out real well. I've been real pleased with it all.
Okay. So going back to the whole patent issue, since you are responsible for development, how much do patents come up in a day-to-day basis? Because at least for us reading the news, it's all about patent trolls and people getting like sued for using a scanner, not even building a scanner on somebody else's, but using a scanner that you bought from Canon. So like when you are developing things, are patents like on the forefront of your mind? Like when you have a developer come to you and say, hey, look at this cool algorithm I created, are you like, crap, we need to make sure it's not patented? Or is it just...
Yeah, we're probably not that strong about it. I think what we generally do is our CTO, Francis Sullivan, he generally kind of keeps an eye on technically how people are solving problems throughout all of development.
Okay.
And when he sees something unique going on, and I emphasize the word unique, I think a lot of people do patents that aren't really unique, and they end up getting rejected at some point, but they waste a lot of time and money. If it's something really unique, Francis will get with them, get it written up, and get it submitted to get a patent. But the main reason that we do it, I can just speak for Spiceworks, it's less about enforcing it and more about you look like a legit technical company when you have a number of patents. I'm not going to say there's a quota or a certain number you have to clear to be legit. But if you had no patents, that sounds fishy. If you had like 500, if you're a software company, I would say it sounds fishy. If you're a hardware company, it's probably a little more. Hardware, I think, is a slightly different kind of game than software. So I think there's a number that you need to have to be a legit software company. It shows you're innovating. I mean, that's a statement of innovation. And it's not on the forefront of everything we think about. It comes up from time to time. We probably do a couple a year, I suspect, and get them pushed in the process. And then it takes, 5 to 10 years for it to play out. And Francis knows exactly how many we have, but I suspect it's a dozen or more. Would be my guess.
Have you had any patent issues? Has it been 8 years?
No. We've had none that I'm aware of. None that I'm aware of. No.
Okay, cool. Kind of going back to like the beer and the liability and the ping pong tables and all that. So you are. I was out with your employees last night. You apparently are like you love CrossFit.
I like working out, yeah.
You like working out.
It's just fighting old age. I'm just fighting old age is all I'm doing.
And so I guess you've hurt your knee a couple of times with that. Now, with CEOs and executives, I know a lot of people, and it's in order to burn off steam and just to get away from things. The best way to not think about any of this is to be doing something where the brain feels that it can't think about anything.
Or you feel like you're going to die.
Exactly.
Yes.
Unfortunately, when you think you're going to die, there's a chance it might happen.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, when you're going, you guys just closed $57 million in funding, which means you've gotten a lot of funding. When you guys are talking with the VCs, does this ever come up? Do they worry about your health? Do they worry about black diamond skiing or wacky stuff? Is it even a conversation piece?
It's never come up, mainly because I don't think any of us do what I'd call extreme stuff. Okay. Jumping out of helicopters and bungee cord jumping, I'd call that extreme. But we'd ski more blue and black diamond, maybe just one black diamond. And I think a lot of us work out, and so I wouldn't call working out necessarily extreme per se. So to me, we're probably just healthier than most, which I think makes you a better person, and you probably live longer. Yeah. I do it because I want to live longer, and I'm fighting old age. Yeah. But it really hadn't come up much. But to be fair, I don't think any of us do what I'd call crazy extreme stuff. Okay. We just got guys that work out and try to stay relatively fit. Okay. It's more of a longevity probably thought than anything else.
Well, I just wondered because they were talking about a couple of years ago with CEOs for large companies where they go to the doctors and they put scopes and does that ever?
It hadn't happened yet, but I think as we get bigger, it might. And I would say that we probably would avoid putting more than 2 of us on any plane. I think that's probably a legit. If we were all going somewhere, we would probably purposely get on different planes. Yeah. Just for the random accident that could happen. Yeah. I think that's fair. But on the extreme side, it doesn't come up a whole lot for us. But I'm speaking from when we had 4 people up to 250. Yeah. in 2 years, if we do this again in a year or two,
Yeah.
I might be saying something different, like, man, I'm getting a physical every month.
Okay. So then one of the questions that comes up now, especially with all the political hubbub in D.C., and I'm 30 minutes out of D.C., Democrats talk about what's best for you, Republicans talk about what's best for you, and Libertarians talk about what's best for you. As far as the government is concerned, and from what the government, whether state, local, national government can do, is there anything that you see that particularly could help? Because they talk about we need to give people tax breaks, or we need to do more education, or to hinder. Is there anything specific that the government can or can't do to make your life
I probably got two things, probably two. I could go longer, but we'll just keep it to two.
Okay.
I think, as the government's getting more into, Google's kind of the poster child for this, where the government's getting into this whole notion of companies tracking what you do on the internet.
Yeah.
Roughly speaking, that's what's going on. And, they're doing it so that they give you more pertinent things so you have a better experience. It's not like they're doing anything bad with it. They're trying to make your life better on the internet.
Yeah.
And I think to the extent they allow that to happen is good for our industry, industry in general, the advertising industry. And on the other side, in general, I think government should just stay out of people's way. And I think to the extent you let innovation win the day, good things happen. To the extent you slow it down, you're probably not doing good things for the people as a whole. And, there's always a trade-off when the government imposes anything on people. There's a trade-off being made, and it's doing something good for some group of people and something not so good for another. And you have to put what's the price of innovation? I don't, everyone has their own opinion. I put a pretty high price tag on it, and I would be careful about slowing down innovation, because guess what? It creates jobs, and I can name, there's a lot of good things that happen from it, and new companies start, and when you slow that stuff down, it's just generally not a good thing. I mean, there are good things that come out of it as well, but one of the trade-offs is you slow down innovation. And to me, I'd put that up at the top of the list, but I'm obviously heavily biased.
Okay. A couple of final questions then. So we just had Southwest Southwest, you just had South by Southwest, and so one of the big things there was Snowden came on and he did his interview or whatever from wherever he is in Russia.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things, like, when I watched him was interesting, at least, it was a tidbit, is he says that because of what he told the world about what the NSA was doing, like the buzzwords, I just love this, was he has radicalized cryptographers.
Yeah.
And so
he got them wound up at least.
He got them wound up.
Yeah.
And so he's talked about how a lot of programming, a lot of things are changing because of what he put out there. Mm-hmm. So that's great to say about everybody. It's kind of one of those things, but does that actually matter here? Like, since all this NSA stuff, has that changed anything that you do?
It hasn't changed much. I think the sensitivity to data security is probably heightened a little bit. I bet there's more people now that are paying more attention to where's this data going.
Yeah. Okay.
And they're not necessarily as trusting as they were before.
Yeah.
Which, I go back to my government statement, the more they do, it's probably not great.
Yeah.
The main thing I think that's going to impact us will just be the number of people that are a little sensitive to where data's going and what's being done with it, and how's it getting there, and how's it getting encrypted.
Yeah.
And that's why I go back to what I said earlier, keeping certain things local, it takes a lot out of the picture. It helps some of that. So I think in general it's probably a good thing. I wouldn't necessarily do what he did, but people being aware of the fact that the government can spy on a lot of stuff is, I don't trust them.
Okay. And so one of the final questions then. So, I get a lot of my viewers, and a lot of the people that are transitioning into technology are older. Like, most of the time when we think about new technology employees, we think about 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds. And the reality is just how the economy has shifted. We have 40 and 50-year-olds where their jobs went away, and so they're retraining at a time when they didn't really think they thought they would be in management,
right?
Not retraining for a new
right.
So what would you say as a technologist, like, if you have somebody that's 50 years old trying to break into this field now?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it is different for them than a 22-year-old.
Yep.
What would be your advice to them?
Yeah, and I would tell the same thing to a 22-year-old, by the way.
Okay.
The number of technologies that are out there is constantly growing.
Yeah.
Nobody has monopoly on them. No, even the kids come out of school don't necessarily know them all. Because, depending what university you go to, you may be learning something that was hot 2 decades ago. Or a decade ago. It could be a decade ago.
Wow, yeah.
And if you think that all the kids coming out of school know all the new technologies, you're kidding yourself, they don't.
Okay.
They may have been introduced to it, but are they good at it? No. Do they know it real well? No.
Yeah.
Now, they might be able to learn and pick it up a little quicker
Yeah.
than someone that's 40, north of 40. But, I would advise people to, get online, take online classes, go to those open source things you're talking about, and look at projects. There's lots of examples out there. Build projects on your own. I mean, you can learn a ton on your own and become extremely proficient in a technology that you care about. I'd pick something that you're passionate about and go off and learn it. And then I can't guarantee you, but I suspect there are companies that want that skill.
Okay.
And you get good at it. I mean, it's not hard to get good at something. It just takes some work. And I think the thing that's really cool now is there's so much out there to help get you started in the open source community and just online in general, that it's just a lot easier than it used to be. You used to have to go buy a book and start going through a book, and now it's just way faster. So I mean, I'd find something you care about and you're passionate about and start working at it. And there'll be companies looking for that skill. I think. I'll just use Ruby on Rails as an example. I mean, it is extremely hard for us to find anybody that knows Ruby on Rails well. It's unbelievably hard.
I'm truly shocked at that.
It's tough. It's really tough.
Okay.
It's tough. Yeah.
So, but with age, I mean, there's the whole idea, you go out, you learn, you work hard, not keep bashing in their heads. But then there's the sad part. There's reality, and things like ageism exists.
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything that they can do to mitigate? So if I'm 50 years old, obviously I don't have the stamina of a 22-year-old anymore, but is there something that I can put on the table to say, this is why?
Yeah, I just look at it if we were interviewing someone like that.
Yeah.
To me, it's kind of, you assume someone older is going to be a little less, I use the word passionate, but it could be aggressive or whatever you want to use. And so that's why I chose my words carefully. It's picking something you're passionate about, and then when you go into an interview, you got to show that.
Okay.
Show that you really are passionate about this thing and you want to get better at it. And when we see those kinds of things line up and they have the right attitude, that's usually a good combination, and that works out 10 out of 10 times.
Okay. And then the final question then. So if you were 18 years old or 20 years old right now, kind of what you would do now, what is the hot thing? Whether it's robotics or whether it's Python, what technology would you think? If I was 18, man, I'd be jumping all over that.
It's funny. I'll just give you an anecdote. I was talking to my son, who literally is 18.
Oh, there you go.
And he wants to get in the computer industry.
Yeah.
So I literally had this kind of conversation with him.
There you go. Okay.
And one of the things that I think is really interesting now is that a lot of people overlook is all of the data that gets mined on the internet, just by every company you can think of. They're all mining some type of data.
Yeah.
And it's what can you do with it?
Okay.
And there's these data scientist type people. They have different labels, but data scientist is one of the labels I hear a lot. And it's a combination of a mathematical background and a programming background.
Okay.
And being able to do interesting things with large amounts of data is, to me, it appears to be a real growing field.
Okay.
And there's, depending what schools you go to, there's not a lot of kids that have a lot of background in that.
Okay.
And so what we end up doing is training people. That we find people that are good at math and can program some, and then we train them. And then after a year or two, they're pretty good at it. I was telling my son, the whole kind of data scientist area nowadays, I think, is a growing field in the computer industry that's pretty hot one.
That's
pretty hot, yeah.
So then the final follow-up then is the big question now. College or Hacker Academy certification, whatever. What would be your route then?
Um, That's tough. I think both can work out. In fact, there's evidence both work out fine. So there's no deal killer either way.
Yeah.
I still think going to college is a worthwhile endeavor, mainly because of the depending what school you go to, the well-rounded education you get. I think it makes you a little more adept at working with different departments and different groups besides just the development aspect of it. And one of the things I tell a lot of the young folks that we hire, there's more to being a developer than just writing code. There's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah.
In fact, at some level, writing the code's the easy part.
Yeah.
And so, personally, I think getting a college education helps on the well-rounded nature of it. But the hacker stuff's good too. Those guys are solid.
It's all good.
They're real solid. Yeah, nothing against them.
Okay. So that's it. I mean, is there any final things that you would tell these guys? If anything I missed that you're like some golden nugget that you would say?
Nugget.
Like, if I wish I had known. I wish somebody had
I'll
told
tell you
me.
one.
Yeah.
I think something that is tough is coming out of school. I go back to people in school because we recruit a lot out of universities.
Okay.
Most universities don't equip their students with much around what type of company to go try to work for.
Oh, okay.
And they really just focus on technologies.
Yeah.
And that's good. You should not, don't give that up. But I wish they would get a little more education around what does it mean to work at a startup? What does it mean to work at a company of 300 and 500 and 5,000 and 50,000 and 500,000?
Yeah.
And because those are dramatically different experiences.
Yeah.
And most people coming out of school, they literally don't know what the difference would be. And what happens is you might pick one just out of ignorance, to be honest,
Yeah.
and then not like it, and then you get kind of, soured on the whole, did I pick the wrong career path? And really what you did was you just picked the wrong company.
Okay.
And, I'm obviously a big fan of startups, and I wish they did more to educate people around the pros and cons, because it's not all good. There's some bad things about being a startup, about working at different sized companies at different stages of their lifetime.
Okay.
And it's true even later in life. If you've worked at the same size companies for a long time and you're not real happy, you might think about changing the size of company you're at, because it'll be a different experience. And I can speak for myself. When I got out of school, I went to work at IBM where as a Unix developer in the kernel and the file system, and it was a blast for maybe 6 months. and then I just hated it. I just didn't like it, and it just wasn't for me. I mean, a lot of other people loved it. It wasn't for me, and I was really not liking it. And luckily I got out because I met a guy that started Tivoli, and I stayed in touch with him. It was back to this kind of network thing, and I went and talked to him, and he talked me into going to work at a startup. Back then it was Tivoli, and it just changed my whole life. I mean, my whole life changed from that one decision I made. And the only thing is I felt like I lost about 2 years right out of school. And it's just because I didn't know. I literally didn't know what I was doing back then. And so that'd be one thing I'd tell people to pay attention to, is the size of company matters.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
All right.
And,
Nice chatting.
Okay, guys, so that was the interview. Like I said, that was with Greg here. He's the vice president of development here at Spiceworks. And again, one of the reasons I'm trying to get out and do these interviews is to show you guys what the real world of technology is like, and to also show you guys that I don't know everything. Like the fact that he said Ruby on Rails developers are incredibly difficult to find actually surprised me. I mean, I knew they were I knew they were expensive. I didn't think they were actually, in fact, difficult to find. So that's the kind of thing that we're trying to do here with these daily blobs and with these interviews. Now, what's really cool is I am here. Oh, let me figure out my own camera system. That's so bad, right? I've been working on this stuff for years now, and I can't figure out my own damn camera system. But anyways, I am here with Chris, who is in fact the director of IT here at Spiceworks. So again, when we start talking about how do you get a job and what is expected of you, what better person to go to than a boss of IT people? So
The boss, yes.
So you're head of you're head of all IT here.
Right, I'm the director of IT and operations.
Okay.
So the way that I kind of sum it up is, if it involves delivering bits, then I own it.
Then you own it. Okay. So all the servers and all
Servers, network infrastructure, both in this facility, at our data centers, our cloud providers, and then we have remote offices in the UK and things like that. So.
Okay. So the question I was talking to you about off screen, because this is very important to many of the fans out there. So if somebody goes out and all they get, the only thing they have is their CCNA, exactly how valuable is that to you?
That and $3 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks.
Really? I mean, is it truly like that bad?
It's not that the CCNA in itself is bad.
Yep.
In my opinion, certifications without attendant experience just tells me that the person holding that certification is really good at studying for and passing exams.
Really? Okay.
That's why I tend to think that the more experience-related certifications are more valuable.
Okay.
The CISSP, where you have to have 5 years of experience in the security industry before you can even sit for the exam.
Yeah.
CCIE, you can try to take it cold, but you ain't gonna get past the written,
Yeah.
much less the practical. Red Hat RHCE requires a certain amount, of having done certain things within the Red Hat ecosystem.
I didn't realize that.
Well, to be successful at it. You need to have done these certain things. You can't just go pretty much read the book and take a practice exam and then be ready to sit for it.
Okay. So with that, with Red Hat, because a lot of people want to get into Linux, is there a certification, or what's the best way to learn Linux, do you figure?
So yeah, there are definitely certifications. Red Hat has RHCA, RHCE, and then a couple of other ones.
Yeah.
But those aren't really going to be the track that you want to take to get started in Linux.
Okay.
Those are things that once you've decided on Linux administration, building systems based on Linux is what you want to do, and then you go for those certifications.
Yeah.
As far as getting started in Linux, I mean, honestly, the best thing to do is go find yourself a cheap laptop, desktop, or whatever, download a distro, and start from there. Install it, get it configured, break it about 15,000 times, try to figure out how to fix it.
Yeah.
I started using Linux back in '97-ish, where there was a lot of, well, that broke. How do I fix it?
Yeah.
I have no idea. Reinstall, and then you learn, well, you do this, you do that, you fix that, and this weird stuff, characteristic here. But because the ecosystem pretty much is free as in freedom, and often free as in beer, you can obtain the software for free, but then you can also look at the way that the software is written, so you can get a better understanding of how it's interacting with the systems.
So because I know talking with Greg, I guess the infrastructure, at least for the apps and everything, is actually using Unix. So
no, we're all Linux.
You're all Linux?
Yeah. So people do that. They're like, well, he's your Unix guy, right? I'm like, well, no.
Okay.
We're not running IRX. We're not running HPUX or anything like that. AIX. We're actually running on Linux.
What is your favorite distro though? Like, what is the distro?
So I gravitate more towards the RPM based distros. So Red Hat. So here we use a mix for our servers, Red Hat Enterprise Linux and CentOS.
Okay.
And then on my workstation I use Fedora. I've always preferred the Red Hat downstream stuff more.
Like so much of this is like, is there any real reason?
I just know, because I've been using it forever, and I just know where stuff is, and I get totally freaked out when I get onto a Debian system. I'm like, why is that directory not where it's supposed to be? And what is this, Apache 2 stuff in here? It's like, just call it HTTPD like it's supposed to be. It's like, I realize that Debian is more towards, the standard as far as file system layout and everything goes, but you know, I'm stuck. I'm stuck in my ways, so that's what I do. I've tried, you know, I tried to use Ubuntu.
Yeah.
I tried to want to like it.
That's right,
And
yeah.
I was like, I don't do that. I don't care for this.
Yeah.
Because 99% of my stuff is done at the command line anyway.
Okay.
So I don't care about Genome or KDE or anything like that.
Yeah.
So Ubuntu, Mint, you know, those things just didn't really offer me anything.
Yeah.
Because what I do is, you know, log in and, you know, I mean, I'm in run level 5, but
Yeah.
it's all terminal
Yeah.
sessions. So.
Okay.
And then obviously our servers are all run level 3, so there's no GUI or anything in there
Yeah.
at all. But that's actually another good point is, you know, picking a distribution doesn't mean that you're going to be with that distro, you know, doesn't mean that you, well, I'm running Ubuntu on my thing here. Well, it doesn't mean that you're an Ubuntu guy, that's all you can do. I mean, it's a good idea to try all these different flavors.
Yeah.
One of the first ones that I started working with back in the day was Slackware.
Yeah. Okay.
Kind of an interesting little thing there. And then a few years ago, I guess because I decided I had no life,
Yeah.
I did Linux from scratch.
Huh. Jeez.
I'll never do that again.
Yeah.
It gives you a healthy respect for the maintainers of the distributions,
Yeah.
because that's effectively what they're doing.
Yeah.
But, you know, finding a distro that you can work with
Yeah.
and be productive in is probably the biggest point.
Okay, cool. Well, I think we're interviewing you tomorrow and somebody else, so we'll save too much of getting that in depth till tomorrow. So let's go over to the questions and see. So question, Eli, may I use C Cleaner on an SSD, or would the SSD be damaged? I can't imagine it would be damaged.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to clean. It's
Well, you know C Cleaner, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I just removed it from some people's systems yesterday.
You don't like it? Yeah, I see that look on your face. Why don't you? I love C Cleaner.
Yeah,
so.
I don't know. I just don't dig things that are like, I'm gonna go fix this for you, kind of things. Like, what are you really doing? I don't know. But really, the only way that I could see CCleaner damaging an SSD is if it went into this bizarre behavior where it was just writing to all the cells.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're not gonna trash an SSD that way.
Yeah. Now, if you use, stay away from Defraggler is Puriform's defragmenting software, so
right.
stay away from that.
Yeah, well, you don't really want to defrag.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you don't want to defrag on an SSD at all. So.
Yeah. Question, what happened to yesterday's blob? Yesterday's blob, actually, YouTube streaming server, like literally when I logged in to start the stream, there was this big red banner that said, we are doing emergency maintenance. You may not be able to start, stop, or even use our service. And so basically I decided it was time to go home and have a cup of coffee. So that's about that. What are the main factors to put in mind when pricing a desktop mobile application? I guess it'd be more like, what's the main factors for if you go to buy some kind of mobile application? Or like when you're buying applications for the company, like what is the process there? How do you
fit and purpose?
Yeah.
You know, is the application, the desired application, a good fit for what that person is trying to do? Does it meet, you know, their needs as far as what they need to get done?
Yeah.
And then obviously price too.
So what is a no-brainer price? Like it's $5, $25, $125. Like what's like? Whatever.
I don't know. It goes back to that fit and purpose thing, because if it's a $5 app and it does exactly what we need to do, then no brainer.
Yeah.
If it's a $200 app and it does exactly what we need to do, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's just, is it worth the amount of money that we're about to spend on it?
No. Okay. Well, you can answer this since it's for Greg, but since you're the IT guy, how much internet bandwidth does a company like Spiceworks use in a normal working day? Or I guess what are your connect? Because I noticed it was like 50 meg down, 50 meg up. Like what is your infrastructure, your internet connection?
Okay, so we actually have multiple ISPs coming into this building. So I guess we're going to talk about this building and not necessarily our data centers.
Yeah, this building.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have two ISPs that come in, and we utilize BGP, so we can get ISP redundancy.
Yeah.
So if one ISP drops, then fail or move out the other one. We have a 500 meg and a 100 meg.
Oh, beautiful. can I ask how much a 500 meg costs?
Not as much as you would think.
Really?
Yeah. Back in, what was it, around 2005 at my last gig, we implemented a leased line that was a DS3, so effectively 48 meg minus overhead.
Yeah.
And that cost twice what I'm paying for 500 megs right now.
So you can't say how much.
So
you're
Metro
paying.
They probably, our ISPs would probably prefer that I didn't share pricing because I think I'm getting a pretty good deal. So, and I am getting a great deal.
Yeah, okay.
But it's not as expensive as you would think.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
The expense is in the infrastructure, because if I'm pulling in 500 meg and 100 meg, in order to secure and route that stuff and then utilize BGP and everything, we have some pretty beefy firewalls and edge routers.
So I mean, even though you've got 250 employees in here, but I mean the dirty little secret of the internet is not everybody's hammering the hell out of the exact same point.
Right.
So I mean, how do you decide that you really? Because everybody right now is a gig. Nobody uses a gig. Like, so how do you decide 500 is better than 200, or you need a gig?
So basically, it's based upon we graph everything.
Yeah.
So we've got MRTG running against everything, and when we start to come up against full utilization, number one, we try to characterize it. Is this bursty? Like it's full utilization for 15 minutes a day, or are we getting close? Are we 90% for 8 hours? And then what is it? Maybe it's people like downloading torrents all day long. Okay, so if we block torrents, then maybe we don't have to buy bandwidth. But if it's actual, like, because we run a lot of video streams and stuff out of here, so that's pretty bandwidth intensive. So originally we had 100 meg coming in, but then I mentioned to the RISP that we were going to start doing all this video streaming stuff, and so they cut me a pretty good deal. It's actually a really funny story though. We were having all kinds of issues because we have internet, and then we also have private lease lines back to our data centers.
Okay.
And we were having issues with the lease line, and in order to troubleshoot it on the ISP side, they're like, well, we're just going to open up to a gig and see what happens there, and like it fixed the duplex issues that we were having. They're like, oh, that's weird, and they're like, yeah, well, okay, we'll get on this and we'll get it fixed. About 8 months later, I realized I was like, we're still at a gig.
Oh wow.
So, and the ISP was like, yeah, how about if we sell you 500?
So with that, like when you start talking about that much bandwidth, I mean, is it really just them flipping a switch? If you needed 750 tomorrow, you just write a check and they flip a switch and you're done. It's not like a big.
So the only thing that has to happen is on the fiber demuxes that sit in our demarc. They're gig, which means that aggregate through there is a gig.
Okay.
So if we've got 500 going to the internet, and then we want a gig to go to our data center, then they got to replace that switch.
Okay.
But and actually, we've already had the one replaced here. It's the one at the data center that had to be replaced. But then it's literally they go in and they issue a command on their side and they open the port all the way up because it's effectively QoS down from, because it's a gig port and they just QoS it down to 500 meg.
Interesting. So what's the most you could get here? Do you figure if you really wanted? Could you get 10 gigs if you really wanted?
Yes.
Yeah. If you had the money.
Yeah, I'm not gonna pay for that though.
I just got it. Well, because it used to be like a gig was
Oh
like
yeah.
the max.
Oh yeah,
Instead
yeah,
of like
yeah.
now,
Well, yeah. So I think on our local loop through one of our ISPs, we could get a 10 gig.
Yeah. Okay.
We'd probably have to justify the hell out of that though. To the ISP.
To the ISP. Oh, not even to,
Right,
but
yeah,
to the ISP
yeah.
itself.
Because they'd be like, really, what do you? But then the amount of routing and security equipment required to do a 10 gig thing would just be enormous.
Yeah. Let's see here. Okay, so here's a question. So how do you get a job at your company? At least from the IT's perspective. What are you looking for nowadays? Like, what are you like? Yeah, I want that on my resume or somebody.
So, like I said, experience is a big deal.
Yeah. Like when you say experience, though, for these guys, like for us, we've been doing this a long time. But like when you're saying experience, what does that actually mean? Like how long experience, or what are you looking for when you say experience?
But it could be, well, I've got a year of systems administration in Linux. but it was in a high volume environment,
Yeah,
all right?
okay, yeah.
Versus I've got, 5 years of some Linux stuff every once in a while, like in, just a corporate setting or whatever, because maybe the guy with the 1 year
Yeah.
in a high volume environment, the experience is a little bit more, relevant or whatever, more valuable as far as that goes. But one of the big things that we look for here is obviously technical know-how,
Yeah.
but cultural fit.
Okay.
And we'll probably talk about this more tomorrow in our interview, but you have to meet both requirements,
Okay.
technical aptitude and cultural fit.
Yeah.
If you're lacking on one of those, then it's going to be pretty difficult. If you're lacking on the technical know-how in a couple of areas, then we can probably, but you're a great cultural fit, then we'll
Yeah.
probably work around that and try to see, make a stretch or whatever.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I don't care if you've got a PhD in computer science from Stanford and you're Sergey Brin's personal web developer or whatever.
Yeah.
If you're a butt, then you're not going to get hired.
Ah, okay.
So.
So where do you guys go? I mean, obviously you have a pretty small team now. Like, how often do you hire, and where's the first place you look? Do you just put it straight out on a Monster, or?
So we actually put it out on our job site. www.spiceworks.com/careers or jobs. I don't know.
Yeah.
I probably should know stuff like that, but I don't. And that's where we advertise it.
Okay.
And then we have an entire recruiting team. I think we've got 8, 9 recruiters over there.
Oh, wow.
And they'll actively go start finding candidates.
Ah, okay.
But typically it's been my experience when I open up a rec, and I'm getting ready to open right now,
Yeah.
we don't really have to go do a lot of finding
Right.
because we just get flooded. Like I hired a help desk back in October,
Yeah.
and I must have gotten 100 applications and or resumes within the first few days of it being open.
Wow.
So.
So it is that time. Okay. Let's see. I have a small business website to build. What recommendations do you have for a site builder? Adobe Muse, Squarespace, Wix? Which one do you personally recommend? I have no idea. I'd probably go with Squarespace. They're doing the most marketing.
Yeah, I'll defer to you on that one because I've never used a site builder service.
Yeah.
I've always actually just coded it myself and run it on a VPS or servers or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've never really used that.
I'd probably argue Squarespace. I haven't personally used it, but it looks pretty. So I don't know. They're easy enough to use. Just use the trial and see if you like it. I would probably argue for Squarespace. From being in your position, where do you believe the best area for IT jobs in the U.S. is, other than Austin?
Geographic?
Yeah, yeah. For IT,
So,
yeah.
so this is going to be one of those classic, it depends.
Yeah.
It really depends what facet of IT are you looking to get into.
Okay.
If you're really interested in, high volume, trading systems, New York is going to be where you go.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're really interested in, cloud infrastructure and working for like an AWS or whatever, then it's where those data centers are located in Virginia and California and Oregon. But if you're looking for just you want to be like in IT, just nuts and bolts, routers, switches, servers, workstations. It's pretty much everywhere because that stuff is everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe you don't want to take a $36,000 a year help desk job in Santa Clara. Not gonna be able to pay your bills,
Yeah.
Unless you live in Oregon.
Yeah.
But it's IT jobs are everywhere.
Is there, like for Austin, is Austin known for anything in technology?
For a really long time, and I actually got my start at a company that might or might not be based in Round Rock and have 4 letters in its name, and start with a D and end with an L.
Yeah.
Austin pretty much used to be like the University of Texas, Dell, and some research consortiums, and IBM.
Yeah.
But then this whole, internet thing happened, and then the .bomb occurred, and the internet thing unhappened.
Yeah.
But then a whole bunch of smart people who were like, well, let's not do that again, and let's maybe try this internet thing again, but maybe not in a city that has 2x the cost of living, you know, as Austin does, like, you know, San Fran or someplace like that, but still has access to a really good pool of talent, especially coming out of the University of Texas and A&M and you know, places like that. But I think Austin has really become known now for startups and innovation.
Interesting. Let's see, I'm going to my third year of university as software engineer, and basically they offer a minor that could be anything. I was thinking of cybersecurity, networking, or web mobile design. So he's getting his degree in software engineering, and then he can go for, so that's a major, then he can go for a minor. So the minor could be in cybersecurity, in networking, or web or mobile design.
See, I don't know. The way I approached it was, I kind of wanted my minor to be out of the concentration that my major was in.
Really? Oh, okay.
You know, to get exposure to other stuff, because part of the deal with university is being exposed to a breadth of areas.
Yeah.
And not necessarily pigeonholing yourself and using it solely as, you know, a training ground or a trade school or whatever.
Yeah.
So my advice would be, you know, pick a minor in something that you're interested in that, you know, really like piques your interest, because honestly, nobody's going to give you a job based on your minor. You know, it's just, like,
So do you being IT director, do you care about degrees in IT? I mean, I know degrees in computer science and computer engineering, obviously, but I don't know, degrees in IT, is that a good one?
Well, I think it all depends on the curriculum.
Yeah. Because a lot of them, it seems like it's just about getting the college paid, not necessarily.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, I think it kind of can go multiple ways. In my group, I have a guy with a computer science degree.
Yeah.
I have an MIS degree.
Okay.
Then I have another guy that has an MIS and an MBA. And then a guy with an English Lit degree. And then our lead senior production systems administrator has a degree in like graphic design or something.
Really? Okay, yeah.
So it's like, you know, to me, getting a degree shows that you have the ability to see something through.
Yeah.
And stick to what can be a rigorous curriculum and be somewhat successful at it.
Yeah.
Is it ever a hard requirement? No. Am I going to reject a candidate because they don't have a degree? No, not if they have plenty of experience, you know, that makes them a fit for the job.
What do you think is a reasonable amount of money to spend on a degree in this modern world?
Dude, my first tuition check to the University of Texas in the fall of 1993 was $1,400.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
I don't even know how much it costs to go to college anymore. I thought I was, you know, that was expensive back then. Mainly because I was writing checks myself. But you know, I think it's, if you can get good value for your degree, maybe I wouldn't go get necessarily a philosophy degree from Harvard.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, without saddling yourself with a debt burden you're not going to be able to address comfortably, then you know, get what best works for you in your situation as far as being able to pay for it or pay it back, you know, later on.
And that's one question I normally get, and I'll see it here, especially being in your position. Are there any preferred schools? Like, oh, no, not at all. No, not at all. No, okay.
Now, am I gonna like seek out like a Harvard CS guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
You know, but if Harvard CS guy comes by and he's like, "Hey, I want to work in your help desk," I'm like, okay. Why? But no, not really. There's no such thing in my mind as a preferred school.
Okay.
It has to actually exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
what is your point of view of the network in the future? That's actually interesting. They've been really pushing the last couple of years, like software-defined
networking. Yeah.
Where are you guys in that, and where do you foresee? Well, what is your migration strategy?
So software-defined networking has come about mainly and probably solely because of the rise of the cloud infrastructure.
Yeah.
And these massive data centers in which they're providing services. And those services have to be very elastic as far as scalability and reactive to customer user demand. So the software-defined networking concept comes up where they're separating the control plane from the management plane, so that they can take these very large, very complex networks and effectively bend them around and reshape them on the fly to accommodate needs on a minute-by-minute, hour-by-hour, day-by-day basis. Because it used to be that you would go in and in a data center, you would build a network, spend millions of dollars doing that, and that's your network.
Yeah.
Now make the app work under those conditions. Now it's make the network work under the app's conditions. And the best way to do that is via software interfaces into these networking components. So I think SDN is going to become a huge thing. And then, in all things technology, it'll trickle down.
Yeah.
So what's a SDN, really probably isn't appropriate for like the 100-man IT shop, because you don't need to do your networking stuff. Like, if you are reconfiguring your network on a daily basis, something's wrong, dude. But everything starts out in the large space, and then eventually it trickles down, and then features of whatever the tech that is start popping up in the smaller scale products, and then before you know it, it's rapidly adopted and wide scale.
But like with you guys, because you guys are rapidly growing, and you're in an interesting point because you're about to move in about a year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's normally when a lot of technology is purchased. It's easier.
Mm-hmm.
Are you looking to deploy any of the software-defined networking components in that year, or is it still far enough off you're not worried?
Yeah, I'm not really worried about it. Like as far as like the corporate offices go, as we continue to mature and redefine our architecture in our data centers for application hosting and serving, that is becoming a bigger deal for us. We've landed upon CloudStack as our platform from which we run our applications. And so any like OpenStack, CloudStack, Eucalyptus, AWS, or anything like that inherently creates these virtual networks that live solely within the virtualization system. So effectively, you are kind of doing software-defined networking at that point on that level. But as far as like actual putting in, iron, metal switches that have SDN components baked into them, I don't see us really adopting that because we're not running this big elastic, provision on demand for 10,000 users kind of thing like AWS or anything like that. And we're certainly not running, 50 data centers like Facebook or Google. So.
That's actually one thing with just curiosity of the modern world. So we talk about like refresh cycles when you basically new computers come in, old computers go out. And so the old refresh cycles were somewhere between 3 to 5 years, and it mattered. I mean, within 5 years, computers changed a massive amount.
Yep.
What is a refresh cycle nowadays, or is there a refresh cycle?
Yeah, so we're still very glued to the 3-year cycle.
3. Okay.
Because at 3 years you get full depreciation. You've gotten all the value you're going to get from that piece of equipment. And honestly, the way that computing is changing, in the PC environment and everything like that, it's rare that you're going to need a salesperson who needs 32 gigs of RAM and a gig SSD and like, a 24-core CPU. So the tech, as far as laptops and things like that are concerned, that was available 3 years ago, is still just fine today. So we can do that 3-year cycle. Now, our servers are kind of another story. That's all workload dependent. So a server that we acquired 3 years ago maybe just doesn't have the capability for what we're trying to do to it now, because it used to be like one app, one box.
Yeah.
Now it's like one box is part of this giant cloud stack infrastructure thing.
Yeah.
And CPU, RAM, and then storage are like a big deal, and as much horsepower as you can shove into it, and then the price points keep shifting. So sometimes it just makes sense to refresh your servers every 1-2 years.
We're at 1-2 years.
In our data centers, we're doing that pretty rapidly. We actually just went through a major refresh back in the fall. Completely deprecated all of our stuff that was older than a year or so, and replaced it with all brand new stuff.
So what's the old, because one of the things I explain to these guys is most of the time, like in a real corporation, when you buy the servers, you normally buy at least the hardware maintenance contract, so that if a part dies, they'll come in. And nowadays, what's the oldest? Because it used to be about 5 years, and then like Dell would stop providing you parts. What's the oldest you would keep a server? If you need, for some reason, you needed to keep it past 2 years, like what's the oldest?
So we're actually in a big deprecation phase right now with our server room in this building. We do have, I've got 2 that are 6 years old, but hey, they're still running.
They're still running, yeah.
And I've got spare parts for them. So
okay.
like, as long as I don't blow the motherboard, oh please don't do that now that I said that. But we've been rapidly migrating critical stuff off of all those old things, and then we're actually getting rid of. I've got an entire rack of stuff that's going, and then another half a rack of stuff that's going to go the next quarter. And we're really fundamentally shifting to a virtualized infrastructure.
Yes. So that's one of the questions for all these people in labs. What happened? All that stuff you're deprecating, where does it go?
Asset recovery businesses.
No, right.
So, Dell, CDW, sometimes, I know Dell for certain has an asset recovery business. I think CDW has one too, where they'll buy your stuff back from you for pennies on the dollar, obviously.
Yeah.
Typically what we do though is we sell them to local, basically either asset recovery places or like recyclers. And they pay for it by the pound.
So 1-year-old server they're paying for by the pound. Okay. Let's see. Let's see here. Question. Can I say who is going to be the interview tomorrow? He is going to be the interview tomorrow, plus somebody else. We're going to talk about, again, more about how you actually get a job in IT and what these folks are looking for. Question. Actually, you said you are hiring right now, right?
Yeah, my rec will pop up on our career site in the next day or so.
Okay. If so, do you require your employees to be on location, or can they work off-site? Any openings or sales and development? You want to know that?
Well, I know for a fact, yes.
Oh,
Sales and development?
Yeah.
In fact, those are our hot jobs right now.
Oh, so those are the hot jobs. So for IT and all this, do you do telecommuting? Would you hire telecommuters? Look at that face. You can always tell by the face. You don't even need the answer. You just see the, never mind.
For help desk, no.
Yeah, okay.
For network engineer, no.
Yeah.
For like a Linux sysadmin who is exclusively dealing with our production environments,
Yeah.
because those data centers are scattered around anyway. Geographic locality with the data center isn't really happening, except for our one in Austin, but then Dallas, Amsterdam, Singapore, whatever. It's not like, it's like, well, I got to be close to that data center. You're not.
Yeah.
Maybe the candidate would have to be really strong and have to really demonstrate that the telecommute or the remote worker thing was in both parties' best interest.
I always love these questions. It's so funny or sad all at the same time. What do you think of age racism in the field in general? Does it exist in your company? I don't know if you can say that. A 30-year-old entering the field now, how is he seen? Can he have a chance to work?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because I keep asking like 30. I mean, I completely understand when they ask about 50-year-olds, but this whole idea of 30-year-olds.
It actually makes me kind of nauseous. I'm like, dude, I'll be 39 in like a month and a half. I'm not that old, man.
Yeah, okay.
Come on. No, absolutely. 30. It's all about, and even the 50-year-old guy. Is he
Yeah.
keeping up with skills?
Yeah.
Is he keeping up with modern technology? Now, a 50-year-old dude who only does COBOL, well, actually, that might be a huge thing because they're all retiring later. 50-year-old dude who only does, Perl based upon, coding standards in 1992.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a little difficult.
Yeah.
But if you're keeping up with modern tech and your skills are up to date and sharp, and it's not like, and you haven't left the industry for 15 years, and now you're like, oh, I'm totally going to break back into IT.
Yeah.
Then I don't even see that. We certainly don't have that issue here.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of 50-year-olds applying. I have way more 22-year-olds applying, but I don't really see age as a barrier to entry from what I have personally seen.
Okay.
Now, I know it occurs.
Yeah.
I absolutely know it occurs. And I think that's a shame. But I think there are some companies who are like, why would I invest, in a 50-year-old who's going to be gone in 5 years or whatever,
Yeah.
or, who has a family and everything like that. Or I could go get a 24-year-old who doesn't have a family and I can work him literally until he drops.
Yeah.
So I know that occurs, but
But
I think
it's I mean, I hate to say it, but is 30 years old even near that level? Again, like I say, with 50-year-olds, I know what happens. I'm sorry for you, but like a
30-year-old, no, not at all.
Yeah. Okay. What's up, Spiceworks? I guess the question is coming up from the interview part because Greg was wearing shorts. What is the attire? I notice you're in a t-shirt.
I might be a little overdressed today.
You might be a little overdressed. Okay.
No, Greg has a thing. Greg always wears shorts.
Always.
If Greg is wearing pants, then we know something's going down. We either have a quarterly board meeting, or he's going to a wedding. Yeah, that's about when Greg wears pants.
Okay.
I mean, it'll be 20 degrees out, and he'll come like popping in shorts. Like, dude, seriously, man, it's cold. What are you doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, this is typical.
So then, when somebody is coming in to interview, because that is the point, to impress and show that they're groveling before.
I have an awesome story about this.
Really? Okay. So.
So I started at Spiceworks 6.5 years ago in October of 2007. And I've been interviewing around and everything. And I come into my first round of interviews and I'm wearing a suit. Go through, the day's worth of stuff. Back then, I mean, there was like 15, 16 employees.
Yeah.
Greg comes in at the end of the day, says, we want you to come back for your second day, although lose the effing suit. You're freaking people out.
Oh, really? So I noticed you.
Yeah.
So what level should these folks be thinking about? I mean, maybe not actually, it's interesting.
Your first, it's always been my opinion.
Yeah.
On your first interview, your first day, wear the suit.
Wear the suit.
Or your dress attire.
Yeah.
And then, as you come into that first day, be aware of what's going on around you. How are the people dressed? Is everybody in a suit and tie? Well, you probably don't want to work there. Is everybody, running around in shorts or, whatever they want, then, just kind of, I wouldn't say show up to the next day in shorts, but then you can probably, maybe khakis and a button down at that point.
Okay.
Although it was very distracting when Greg was interviewing me and I'm wearing a suit and he's got this horrible loud Hawaiian shirt thing going on. I'm like,
Yeah. Okay.
it's like it's like Toucan Sam Fountain on your shirt, dude. Yeah, so just adapt to what you see around you.
Okay.
And also it's, kind of per industry too,
Yeah.
because, software effectively startup in Austin, Texas, probably going to be a completely different environment than financial trading firm in New York City.
Yeah.
So.
Pulling. Let me do a refresh here. This is terrible. Somebody's getting lag. Sorry guys, we're getting lag. That is actually not my fault. I'm looking at the screen right here, and it looks very good from my side.
What's that 500 megs of bandwidth?
Yeah, 500. That's beautiful. I'm at 500 megs of bandwidth. easy, good interviews, border gateway protocol.
Yeah. I have a fun BGP interview question or story too.
Let's see. What the hell? Yeah, okay, they're all kind of. So he's asking, what's the first programming language I should learn? I keep talking to guys. Administration is going programming. So what's a good programming language for sysadmins or for the?
So a good language for sysadmin is going to be dependent upon the operating environment. Are you a Windows guy or are you a Linux guy?
Okay.
If you're a Windows guy, PowerShell all the way. I mean, that's it, just PowerShell.
Okay.
Are you a Linux guy? Well, so now it starts to, kind of broaden out a little bit.
Yeah.
Bash is going to be a requirement.
Yeah.
You're just going to have to know how to utilize the embedded scripting environment within the operating system.
Yeah.
Python is huge. Perl is still
Is Perl
there.
Perl seems so 2000.
It's there.
Is it there? Okay, yeah.
It's annoying. Is on my LinkedIn. They've got that endorsement thing or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Pearl is my number one endorsed thing. I'm like, really, people?
Oh, okay.
I've got like 80 endorsements. I'm like, you know what? 79 of you have never even seen my Perl. What are you doing? But Ruby is picking up, especially because configuration management systems such as Puppet and Chef are implemented in Ruby.
Okay.
So Puppet uses a DSL that's based on Ruby, and then Chef actually utilizes Ruby for its recipes.
So what is Puppet then? I will admit there are things I don't know, and I've heard a lot of people today talking about Puppet. It's kind of one of those random things I've heard about and never mucked with.
So one of the things that you strive for in IT and system administration is stability. Well, you get stability by using known quantities.
Okay.
So if this server does this job, and it's going to be joined by this server, and that server, and that server, and that server, and they're going to do the same job.
Yeah.
Well, you want them all to be pretty much identical.
Yeah.
You can do that by hand if you have 3.
Yeah.
If you have 50, you don't want to do it by hand. If you got 1,000, you can't do it by hand.
Okay.
And so these configuration management frameworks come into being, Puppet being a configuration management system.
Huh.
And what this is we utilize Puppet here. You go in and you've got these configuration manifests effectively that says that this particular server or type of server has these packages installed on it, has this language runtime installed on it, this version of that, this whatever, and then that gets applied to servers that meet that particular category to ensure that they're all at the same version of everything on there.
Okay.
That way we don't accidentally have like a down rev Apache running on one of our web servers, or we have we've got the wrong Ruby running or something like that, which we would know because everything would fail immediately. But you know what I'm saying? Or keeping kernel versions, like everything, because you don't want to be troubleshooting a server and be like, what is wrong with this thing? It's like, oh, because it's running the wrong kernel. We'll have that happen. But then, so we use Puppet twofold. One, to kick additional instances or new instances. We'll utilize CloudStack that will provision the instance based on a golden, baseline image, and then Puppet takes over and configures that instance to be that particular type of thing.
Yeah.
Is it an Elasticsearch server? Is it Memcache? Is it a web server? But it keeps commonality and everything the same within those categories.
Okay.
But then we also use it for ongoing. Puppet runs every 30 minutes or whatever and goes out to all of the nodes that it can contact that it knows about that are under management, and basically has something changed. Has something changed on the configuration side of the server because somebody got in there and manually did something, we'll revert it back to what we want it to be. Or has something changed, we've decided that we're adding this or we moved this and we pushed a new configuration in, then it'll go apply that new configuration.
That's interesting. And you use Ruby, because I don't think of Ruby as a sysadmin.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a great language.
Yeah, so
but
Puppet is implemented in Ruby,
Yeah.
and it utilizes a DSL that is Ruby-like. And then it utilizes ERB. But then Chef is actually the implementation. There is no DSL, it is Ruby.
Yeah.
But yeah, Ruby is actually, I've been using it for quite a few things for system administration. And you know, it's very easy to learn. It was very easy for me to pick up, but I come from, you know, C++ and C and Java, Perl, you know, so Ruby was like, oh, awesome.
So I guess one of the questions now, like, so Active Directory has been a massive thing for the Windows world for at least since 2000 until. Do you guys still use like Microsoft Active Directory in here? You
Yep.
still, yeah.
Yep.
And then, what do you see going forward? Because one of the shocks when I dislike Bomber is it doesn't really feel like they're building it for like all these mobile devices, and it seems like it's like, no, we control the desktop and the servers, and then anything else. Do they have any products for mobile, or what do you see as the replacement for Active Directory then? Or is it
I don't think there's going to be so much a replacement for Active Directory. I think Microsoft really is going to need to innovate with Active Directory to, you know, account for this changing world of the workforce isn't entirely based upon the PC anymore. So being able to utilize federation services so that people outside the firewall or whatever can authenticate to get to services. This notion of all these SaaS cloud, you know, applications like Salesforce and Box.com and Dropbox and things like that. There needs to be the ability to federate your Active Directory to those things so that somebody outside has one login that they got to remember on end devices. You know, so I can get to my Salesforce app on my phone because I was able to connect it to Active Directory, you know, these other things like that. But you know, tablets and phones are just huge. You know, they are literally huge. Our you know, network budget or whatever, like, is, and when I say network budget, I mean like the amount of resources that we plan to consume on a network basis. The way that we budget for that is we say, you know, for each user, we anticipate 3 devices. A laptop and a phone and a tablet, or a laptop and a workstation and a phone, you know. But the point being that there's always going to be some sort of mobile device, phone or tablet, in that equation because we know everybody has them. So I think Microsoft really needs to figure out what they're going to be able to do about, you know, to extend the borders of the enterprise to allow management of these resources, you know, the people with the resource and the resource itself. Because right now it's all being done by, you know, third parties with mobile device management stuff.
And so do you have, like, especially with the software as a service, do you have any solution with that? I mean, you got 250 smart techie type people in here. I'm so happy I'm not you. Well, because I mean, if you've got Google Drive and you've got who knows how many of these things.
Yeah, so we actually have a pretty strict prohibition. People can only utilize services that we authorize and that we pay for company-related stuff. So we have a couple of providers, I'm not really allowed to say who they are, that are on these are approved and actually use these to store Spiceworks material in. But other services, you know, Google Drive and things like that, are strictly prohibited. We don't want our data running into places that we don't know about.
Do you know if that's actually being followed?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, because our intrusion detection system, you know, does inbound and outbound. It'll tell me, you know, what's going on, who's going where, and everything like that. But also the Spiceworks application itself will tell us about cloud services that are popping up on people's systems, and it'll tell me if somebody is using, you know, like, oh, this person's using Dropbox, or this person is using blah. You know, it's like, then we go have a discussion with that user.
Cool. Interesting. Let me see if there's any final question, and looks like we're about at the 2-hour mark, actually. Do you like Mac? Oh, I guess here's as a sysadmin. Obviously, I'm a Mac guy at this point.
Yeah.
I have migrated, but I'm currently at Mac. What is your preference for the desktop?
For my own personal
Yeah.
use? Okay, so my workstation I run Fedora on.
Oh, really? Okay.
I do all of my development, all my coding, all my Linux administration from within a Linux environment.
Okay.
I have a Windows laptop, it's running Windows 7 Pro. That's because even though I'm the director, I still have to get access. I have to still go in and manage Active Directory. I still have to do that.
Yeah.
And then we've got some things that are firmly stuck in 2006 and only work in IE. And so it's like, but what's weird is our environment. We are probably majority Mac in our environment at this point.
For the whole company.
Wow. And then on my team, our senior sysadmin who handles all of our production stuff, he's on a Mac.
Yeah.
Our tools developer, he's on an Ubuntu-based laptop.
Yeah.
And then everybody else is running at least some sort of Linux on a workstation, except for our one guy who is dedicated solely to all the Windows administration stuff.
So if you have so many people on Mac, because I know with me, even with my 3 Macs here, I'm not necessarily treated that well by the Apple world. Do you get like some kind of special? No, even with that many. Wow. No, you're really. Oh, okay.
Nope, not at all. I think Apple doesn't really care to do that because they know people are buying their products anyway.
Huh, okay.
Yeah, so we don't really get any kind of like sweetheart deals.
No.
Now, maybe if I was running a 10,000 person company and I was like, look, we're going all Mac, then maybe Apple will cut me 10% or something. But yeah, nothing, no financial consideration.
But what about like maintenance contracts? Because these are a bugger.
Ugh.
Even with me, it's like, this thing broke, I'll be like, here, I'll pay you $2. You fix it. Like, so.
Yeah, so that's actually one of my main complaints about Apple's products. HP, Dell, whatever, we can get on-site service contracts where if somebody's laptop, throws a rod, Dell or HP or somebody sends somebody out and they fix it right here.
Yeah.
Apple, you buy the Apple Care thing or whatever, and then their thing is you take it to the Genius Bar at the Apple Store or you ship it to us.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, dude, that's not really company friendly, man, because now it's like 5 days gone.
Yeah.
So we have to keep extras on hand just for those contingencies.
Yeah, so you do it that way. Cool. So since we're at the 2-hour mark, I think that the final question then, from your point of view, what do you think the next boom is? What do you think, if you're looking at technology, you think where are things going? Where do you think things are going? Like what's the next hot thing?
So let me caution you, you're talking to a guy who invested a crap ton of money in e-toys. I lost it all.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I guess the risk of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
The next big boom
Yeah.
thing is going to, and God, I hate these terms because they're so annoying, but the whole notion of the Internet of Things,
Yeah.
where everything is addressable, everything has some sort of functionality to talk to the Internet,
Yeah.
whether it's your refrigerator or your car or your dog's collar.
Yeah.
I think that is going to be gigantic,
Okay.
and that entire infrastructure has to be designed, built, and maintained.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about so much data and so many endpoints coming in
Yeah.
that it's just going to be massive in scale.
I guess that's somebody was giving me crap about this, the final question. So I always come up with the last final question of curiosity. IPv6.
Look, I got my IPv4 skills
Yeah.
through blood, sweat, and tears. I'm not giving those things up. Damn it.
Really? Okay.
No,
Yeah.
IPv6. Yeah, it's a thing from what I've heard.
So do you have any of it deployed? Do you have any plan? Because it seems like in '99 when I was doing this, they literally were saying like next year.
Yeah, so basically I'm going, IPv4 exhaustion is going to happen the same year that the year of the Linux desktop happens, because that's been going on for 10 years too. No, it's because there's so much stuff out there that just can't switch and change. And there are so many people out there who are firmly entrenched in their IPv4, and they're either unable, unwilling, or have a political problem with IPv6. Adoption has not been rapid outside of Google and Facebook and things like that. But even then, they're obviously still reachable over IPv4. So it's not like somebody's been like, that's it, I'm done. They've called a complete sever. I'm not doing IPv4 anymore. You want to talk to me? You're coming over to radio tunneling or whatever like that. And it's just not happening. But I do firmly recognize that exhaustion is going to occur. I went to a conference up in New Hampshire back in August, a DNS conference. And this guy, Cricket Lou, he literally wrote the book on DNS. Wow. He used to manage the HP DNS domain. And he showed the exact calculations. There are, I think, AppNic still has a few /8s. Afrinic has a bunch of /8s because apparently Africa doesn't require addresses. But Europe and the US are pretty much drained. And I think, weirdly enough, Latin America was drained as well. Europe and North America have gone into their emergency allocation scheme at this point, where you want an IPv4 block? Yeah, no, not really. It's not going to happen, dude. Like, we actually, in order to get a /24, we had to get a lease or an allocation from our ISP because Aaron wouldn't give me a /24.
So do you have a migration plan yet to IPv6, or is it still something, one of those, it's somewhere out there on the horizon?
Yeah, so my migration plan for IPv6 is to go hide in a corner for about 3 months, have somebody else implement it, and then I come back and don't ever touch it. I haven't really put a whole lot of investment of time or thought into it at this point. It's one of those things, like, I know it's there, it's in the back of my mind, I know it's going to happen, but I'm pretending like it's not.
Do you know with your apps, are they, since it's all cloud-based? No, wow, so you guys are just totally, no IPv6.
So, I mean, now, we have IPv6 available on our edges, like for public, so we can create IPv6 quadruple A records right now. And you can reach our applications on, but then obviously they're still talking internally on IPv4. So publicly, we could turn on IPv6 tomorrow if we wanted to. Probably, maybe. I don't know. I should go test that.
Wow. I thought I was just behind the times. I figured I'd come here and be like, oh yeah, we've implemented. We just need to throw a switch.
I honestly, I don't know anybody in my circle of acquaintances that has adopted IPv6 in any shape, outside of a test lab or anything.
Really? Not even, because I kind of figured like maybe the server rooms, because you got to compartmentalize it obviously. But I figured, but nah, not even.
In fact, I could see server rooms being like the last ones to go. I could see our client network going to IPv6 first. But then I'm also like, it freaks me out because it's like the whole point of NAT was to preserve IP addresses so that you could preserve private spaces, and then you NAT out to a single or multiple, or a few publicly routable addresses. But then it's like, do I really want these IPv6 clients advertising their address on the internet? I mean, obviously they won't be reachable unless I screw up the firewall, but since I don't really know IPv6, I can totally do that. But it's I don't know, it's like one of these freaky, like, I don't want his IP address actually on the internet, because I'm used to like the natted way of doing things. So.
Well, thank you for talking to me, and we're gonna talk for like another hour or so tomorrow. So,
all right.
So cool, great. So, that was the Daily Blob for today. Again, remember this entire week we're here at Spiceworks headquarters, and we're interviewing with people and talking with people, and I'm getting lots of field trips and stuff, and learning lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff. So do stay tuned for the rest of these, and with that, we will call it a day, and I will see you guys at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow.